Thank you for joining us. We know it's the last of the day, but we really appreciate your presence. I'm Romain Sibyl, Chair Right and Business Manager for UNICEF in East Asia and Pacific, and I have the honor of moderating the session today. Today, we will be discussing the challenges that are faced by the families and children of labor migrants, and what kind of support can government and businesses bring to them. After hearing in the first moment from UNICEF, the working group on business and human rights to set the scene, we will hear from the reality of migrant workers in the construction sector in Thailand, and then we will move to a panel. So to open this session, I please hand the microphone to Mio Zinyunt, our Regional Deputy Director for UNICEF East Asia and the Pacific. Mio, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roman. Good afternoon, distinguished participants, colleagues, partners, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you still have energy because this has been a long day and this is the last session of the day. But the topic will be very interesting, and I'm sure we have a very good panelists to really motivate you and also look forward to a lot of contribution and discussions. It's been an honor to welcome you to this important dialogue to promote family-friendly policies for the care, protection of children and their families in the context of labor migration. First, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the International Organization for Migration, IOM, and also UN Working Group on the Business and Human Rights, ably chaired by Khun Pichamon, and also the Office of the High Commission on Human Rights, and all our stakeholders from Asia-Pacific region who are engaging in this important dialogue to build the systems of care and support for the migrant workers and their children. Labor migration is a global force for development, and also it's shaping the economies and society, no doubt about it. And there's also a potential for a powerful avenue for the inclusion, for equity, and also expanding the opportunities for all. However, we must also ensure that the rights and well-being of all those affected by the labor migration, including the children and the families, their rights are fully recognized and also protected. And also, I have to admit that labor migration brings to us a lot of more focus and sharp focus on child rights, especially protection and care of the children, regardless of where they are born or where the parents work. We also need to ask ourselves questions on whether our systems, our policies, our workplace, our social protection system for care and support, are they truly upholding the rights of the children and their families for the better living conditions? The currently existing frameworks enable labor migration are often designed for the workers, not for the families. And labor migration structures also encourage low-wage workers to migrate alone, without the family. It has created children become invisible in this equation of labor migration. I want to highlight three things for this important dialogue forum. First, employers have an essential role to play. The choices made in the workplace can either deepen the risks faced by migrant workers and their family, or help address those risks and mitigate those risks. The data consistently shows that businesses significantly benefit from improved employee retention, increased productivity, a more stable and motivated workforce, and also for them, it's a good reputation as part of the responsible actors in the business. Second, about the family-friendly policies at the workplace. This is a powerful tool for change, and they help workplaces become more than just a site of production, but also a platform for inclusion, protection, and opportunities. When employers embrace family-friendly policy to provide paid parental leave, flexible working conditions, access to affordable childcare, ensure decent wages, and assist family throughout the migration cycle, they will not just improve the working conditions, but this is an investment for the children and the families and future development of the children. Family-friendly policies are key policy agenda for this region, Asia-Pacific region, and we have proven economic benefits from the family-friendly policies. In order for those policies to truly effective, they must include migrant workers, regardless of their contract status or sector that they are working. And also governments have to work hand in hand with the business sector to promote incentives to adopt workplace practices and policy. Thirdly and finally, I just want to highlight that we have at our disposal very strong normative foundations and conventions. To start, Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRC, we have ILO conventions, International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and the Members of Their Families, Global Compact on Migration, and in this region we have ASEAN Declaration on Children in the Context of Migration. We have such a number of conventions. Now it's time we need to make those conventions into action. Action that is grounded in human rights, and also driven by collaboration among players. Together, we can redesign the workplace of today and the future of the children tomorrow. Workers are not just workers. They are also mothers, they are fathers, they are caregivers, and the members of the families and communities. So let us be ambitious. Let us challenge the status quo and incorporate family-friendly policies into our workplaces. By this, we can create not only a more humane migration system, but also stronger families, empowered children, and societies that care. Thank you very much, and back to you, Roman.
Thank you so much, Mio. Thank you for the inspiring words to get us started. And I hand over to Dr. Pichamon Yeopatang, the chair of the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights. Thank you, Pichamon, for being with us.
Thank you very much, and forgive my absence earlier. Carla was very kindly feeding me food because I haven't eaten all day. But that's a bit too much information that I just shared. Let me really focus on why I'm here, which is to talk about this very important topic of promoting family-friendly policies in order to protect children and their families in the context of labor migration. Now, this is an extremely timely topic. It's timely because we are seeing with greater concern the persecution of migrant workers and their families in various jurisdictions. It is also timely because the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights is going to be presenting a report to the UN General Assembly next month on the subject of labor migration, business, and human rights, where we really delve into the issues, the challenges that migrant workers and their families face when it comes to business-related human rights abuses, but we also go into recommendations as to how things can be made better, how we can better value, how we can better appreciate the invaluable work that migrant workers provide to economies, but equally to societies. And here I really do have to acknowledge the leadership of UNICEF, of IOM, and of OHCHR, all three entities that have supported the working group closely and deeply in preparing this report, which I'm looking forward to delivering in New York. Now, we meet today with a shared understanding that while migration is a powerful global force shaping economies and societies, it also profoundly affects families. Migrant workers are not only employees, they are mothers, fathers, caregivers, and members of communities. Protecting their rights and well-being is really inseparable from protecting the rights and well-being of their children too. And yet, far too often we forget their families and we forget their children, and this is problematic. Our report to the General Assembly dedicates a paragraph, and I will say that this is a big deal because we are facing more limited words that we can use in our reports. But we have dedicated an entire section really to looking at the intersectional considerations when it comes to protecting migrant workers' rights. And as part of that, the working group, through consultations with more than 1,000 stakeholders for this report, was one of the key concerns that was raised to us is how the abuses faced by migrant workers really cascade onto their families as well as to their children. A major issue here, for instance, is one of family separation, often prolonged by restrictive visa systems that migrant workers find themselves in. This undermines, needless to say, the right to family life, and can also lead to deep mental health impacts on workers, their spouses, and their children. Children left behind often face psychosocial stress and neglect when their parents have to move overseas. And here I have to add, previously, before I joined the working group, I was working a lot on China. And the issue of left behind children in China, and I believe here the latest statistics from 2020 is that there are more than 60 million left behind children. Children whose parents have to migrate from rural areas into urban areas in order to seek work. Children who are then left with grandparents, with other caregivers, but who are then deprived of the opportunity to be raised by their parents, to have that family life. And this can indeed create psychosocial stress and also create or perpetuate neglect. At the same time, children who accompany their parents may be excluded from schools, denied access to health and social protection, or face language and cultural barriers. Over the course of our consultations with various stakeholders, governments, businesses, civil society, migrant workers themselves, this was raised as a key issue of concern. And here we must note, undocumented children are at even greater risk of statelessness, trafficking, detention, and exclusion from both child protection and from labor systems. These are not marginal issues. They go to the heart of how we design migration and employment policies and how workplaces respond to them as well. And so this is why employment policies and practices matter so much. Family-friendly policies, paid parental leave, flexible working conditions, decent wages, affordable childcare are not just worker benefits. They are tools that can dismantle risks and prevent cycles of deprivation and neglect. They ensure that migrant workers are not forced to choose between earning a livelihood and caring for their children, between opportunity and family unity. When businesses put these policies into practice, they are not just improving working conditions, they are investing in stronger families and healthier communities. But the link between migration policies and employment policies must not be overlooked here as well. Too often they are treated separately, when in reality they are deeply interconnected. Restrictive migration regimes can leave workers dependent on a single employer, limit their ability to bring their family members, or deny access to social protections as well. All of this heightens the risks and pushes children further into the shadows. Coherent, rights-based policy frameworks that put families at the center are therefore urgently needed. And we already have strong normative foundations for this, from the Convention on the Rights of the Child through to the ILO, the International Labor Standards, through to the Global Compact for Migration, and the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. We have the foundations, and yet systemic challenges remain. Without real action, we risk perpetuating a cycle, again, of deprivation, of neglect, of exclusion across generations. And so here, family-friendly policies really are not an optional extra. They are smart and necessary investment. Businesses that adopt them see stronger retention, more motivated workers, and a healthier reputation on top of it all. And governments that support them will build resilience and social cohesion. And of course, for the families themselves, they benefit by staying together, raising children who thrive, and contributing to both their countries of origin, but also their countries of destination. And so as we engage or embark in this dialogue, we need to hold on to this simple truth, that workers, again, are never just workers. They are parents, they are sons and daughters, they are caregivers. And if we design our workplaces and our migration systems with that reality in mind, then we can build not only fairer economies, but also stronger families, empowered children, and most importantly, more caring societies. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Romain. Thank you.
Thank you, Pichana. Thank you for your strong words, as always, and I think it's give a sense of reality and the challenge, but also of the way forward. Without further ado, I'm handing the microphone to Sir Nadon Chantatanawong. I hope I pronounced that right. Director of Systemic Impact for Bandek Foundation in Thailand, who's going to talk to us about the reality and perspective of the migrant workers and their children in the construction sector in Thailand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here and to share the voice from migrant workers, parents, and children in Thailand construction sector. They are the one building our city, and yet their struggle as families are too often invisible. So today I would like to highlight 2 or 3 points in part of the construction sector and family and their family. So one, about the mobility and legal insecurity. I think families are frequently relocated from one construction site to another, right? For children, this means disrupted schooling, losing healthcare, and losing friends. So at the same time, the complex layer of subcontracting layers make it difficult to worker to maintain legal status. These insecurities create stress, increase risk of exploitation, and undermines their ability to provide stable care for their children. That is the one thing. And the next, family and support and caregiving. Migrant workers are not workers. They are also parents, but working conditions rarely not acknowledge this. When wages are delayed or unpaid, right, the impact on families is immediate and severe. Children may be put out of school. Family cannot afford food or medicine. And paid parental leave and family-friendly policy are almost absent, leaving parents without the support they need. That is a point that we learned from the construction sector. The next, let me share one story about a 10-year-old girl living in the workers in construction camps. She wakes up early mornings, prepare food for her younger brother before to go to school. And when her parents return late from the construction site, she's still the one caring for him. This is a child carrying adults' responsibility, not because of lack of love from their parents, but because of policy, and because of workplace fail to support from their family. This is one key point in terms of the policy and company, how can support in terms of the family, right? So for BSI, we try to provide and support the company, how they can invest in terms of the family-friendly policy or take care of the children and their parents. We work with the ministry to organize the training. We develop some tool and framework with UNICEF, and it's like a guideline for the company. Right now, we have 28 or 30 companies try to implement this framework and take care for the children. So in construction, workers are the backbone of our city. Then the children are the future of our society. So to protect them, we must ensure decent work, fair wages, and dignity at home. By listening to their voice, we can build not only the stronger city, but stronger society. That's the Bandek and BSI believe that why we work with the private sector and also the government agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadon, for giving a more sense of reality of what the migrant face in the construction sector in Thailand. Thank you to my three panelists for the moment. I will invite the next panel, please, to come with us and present them meanwhile. So we will have, thank you so much. So we will have for the panel, Ms. Anne Balthazar, who's a member of the Labour Working Group of Jurisdictional Approach for Sustainable Palm Oil in Sabah, Malaysia. We will have Kun Pum, who is the Business Development and Support Director from the company T. Piragrish Company Limited, Thailand. We will have Dr. Litea Meo Sewabu online, who's a specialist of international and regional leads for Pacific Islands from the Western Sydney University. And we will have Ms. Rasika Jaya Surya, Senior Policy and Partnership Coordinator from the IOM. Thank you all for being with us today. It's a pleasure and an honor to having you. I will start with you, Anne Balthazar, please. JASPO is a subnational government initiative in the state of Sabah, Malaysia, who's driving sustainability and compliance for palm oil production and supply chain in the region of Sabah. In JASPO, you facilitate value chains actors to better respecting children's rights and support of working parents through labor protection and employment practices. Could you please share with us a little more on this work and unpack relevant challenges in promoting family-friendly policies for migrant workers? You have to push hard. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're still with us. It's such an important issue, and we're talking about children, and we don't really even have children here today. So I hope we will be able to do justice to the children who are not present, but we are discussing them. And I hope you'll be able to follow me for the entire session. So thank you very much. I'm a child advocate. I actually am part of an NGO working on statelessness and documentation in Sabah. If you don't know where Sabah is, we're just next to Brunei. So the population is 1/3 non-citizens, so we have hundreds of thousands of children who are non-citizens, and a lot of them are in our oil palm plantations. So as a child advocate, I entered the palm oil space because, well, there are many problems, and I used to really hate oil palm plantations because there's so many in Sabah. While there are many problems, it is also one of the most highly scrutinized industries. And in Sabah, that scrutiny has created one of the better models to protect children. And it was in the plantations where community learning centers or schools for non-citizen children, these hundreds and thousands of children who are not able to attend public government schools, that they were able to, community learning centers are able to operate legally. So before that, they were not even able to operate schools for these children. So without sustainability certifications, it would have been far harder to push the child rights agenda, especially for smallholders, medium-sized plantations who already struggle to earn enough. But today, I represent the Jurisdictional Approach to Sustainable Palm Oil, or JASPO Sabah, which is a multi-stakeholder but government-led initiative bringing together businesses, government, and civil society, like myself, to work on sustainability, and we're pushing hard to also make sure that the child is also heard in these spaces. So why are there many children in Sabah's plantations? Sabah has a different situation compared to West Malaysia, where many migrant workers just cross land or sea borders. We are bordering Indonesia as well as Philippines to work in Sabah, and they bring their family with them. However, the reality children face in plantations is stark. With limited childcare, children are left unsupervised, exposed to sexual abuse, and without any protection system for them, or brought into the fields. Women have little maternity or health support, leaving both mothers and children at risk during childbirth. They don't have access to early childhood vaccination or even disease outbreaks. And documentation barriers exclude children from basic rights to education, to healthcare, things that we take for granted, leaving them invisible, and some become stateless because of the lack of access to birth registration. And to address the issue of child labor in Malaysia, all children must have access to education. And poverty pressures families to involve children in hazardous work. Without working, they cannot put food on their table. So you want to say no child labor, but then it also means no food on the table. So it's a highly nuanced issue. So children are the most vulnerable in our society, the least visible, yet carrying the greatest weight of our choices as adults. We need to hear their voices more. I'm so happy to see some youths here today, so at least we get to hear all these young, valuable voices. There have been good practices in Sabah. At the same time, companies have supported community learning centers with space, transport, because plantations are so big. It's so big. It's a whole city on its own there. So transportation is something that's very expensive. And also funding for learning centers. Estates partner with NGOs to establish child safeguarding mechanisms. and the Indonesian consulate to co-fund education. The Sabah Labor Ordinance, our state labor ordinance, was recently amended, which including strengthening housing standards and finally laws against child labor. Only this year, I think, yeah. And within the sustainability certifications, such as Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil, which has been made compulsory in Malaysia, and the Roundtable of Sustainable Palm Oil, family-friendly policies are being introduced, alongside efforts to raise awareness among industry players. Looking forward, there are clear opportunities. Strengthening family-friendly policies within our sustainability standards, expanding vocational training and safe pathways for youths to move from learning to decent work, deepening awareness so more industry players see child protection as core to sustainability, and proving the business case that protecting children reduces turnover, boosts productivity, and builds reputation. Children are the most vulnerable, and they have the least protection, because in the systems, it's built for adults. The least voice, and yet they carry the heaviest burden of our choices. That is why we have an obligation, not just as shared duty bearers, but as parents, employers, and community members to protect them. Protecting children is not charity, it is their right. And it's also part of sustainability, productivity, and reputation. So when we talk about sustainability, true sustainability is not only about forests or carbon, but also about people, dignity of children, and the future we want to build together. And we through JASPO in Sabah are working together towards this future, although it can be difficult sometimes because of the different perspectives of government, businesses, and NGOs, but at least we have started journeying together. And for us at ANAK, my organization, we are made of previously stateless children of migrants. We are working hard to making sure children are protected and at the heart of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this testimony and sharing a little better the practices that the Sabah companies are trying to put in place. I will now hand over the microphone to Kunpon from Pierre Agrish Company Limited to tell us more about what your company is doing for migrant workers in Thailand and what you believe can be developed now and in the future for these workers. Thank you.
ครับสวัสดีครับขออนุญาตพูดเป็นภาษาไทยนะครับสวัสดีครับผมยานิกเป็นตัวแทนจากบริษัทต่อพิรกิจจำกัดบริษัทต่อพิรกิจจำกัดของเราครับทำเกี่ยวกับเรื่องของก่อสร้างครบวงจรซึ่งแน่นอนว่าบริษัทของเรามีแรงงานอยู่หลายท่านนะครับซึ่งเรามีความมุ่งมั่นนะครับที่จะพัฒนาสร้างมาตรฐานความเป็นอยู่ที่ดีให้กับคนในองค์กรของเราไม่ว่าจะอยู่ชนชาติไหนก็ตาม Thank you บริษัทของเราครับได้ลองผิดลองถูกกันมาเยอะนะครับจนกระทั่งทีมงานของเราครับได้เจอกับ BSI ที่เปรียบเสมือนเป็นเข็มทิศนำทางให้การพัฒนาแคมป์งานของเราครับได้มาตรฐานและยกระดับให้ดีขึ้นในทุกๆแคมป์ที่เรามีการก่อสร้างแน่นอนครับบริษัทของเราครับให้ความสำคัญกับการจัดหาสภาพความเป็นอยู่ที่ดีขึ้นให้กับครอบครัวแรงงานในแคมป์ซึ่งถือว่าสิ่งนี้เป็นกลยุทธ์สำคัญกลยุทธ์หนึ่งนะครับที่จะทำให้เราเติบโตอย่างยั่งยืนเราพยายามปรับปรุงโครงสร้างพื้นฐานเพื่อสร้างสภาพแวดล้อมที่ปลอดภัยให้กับครอบครัวแรงงานของเราและสิ่งสำคัญครับเราให้ความสำคัญกับเด็กที่อยู่ภายในครอบครัวที่ติดตามคนงานของเรานะครับซึ่งทั้งนี้ครับเราก็ได้รับการอบรมนะครับและการชี้นำจาก BSI ในการพัฒนาการอบรมให้แก่แรงงานของเรารวมไปถึงทุกครั้งที่เรามีการอบรมครับเราจะเชิญสตาฟแรงงาน และผู้บริหารระดับสูงเข้ามาเรียนรู้ร่วมกันครับเพื่อพัฒนาต่อยอดอย่างยั่งยืนทั้งนี้ครับเรายังมีการให้ข้อมูลแก่แรงงานครับสนับสนุนเด็กๆนะครับให้เข้าเรียนตามสิทธิ์ที่เขาควรจะได้รับทั้งนี้เวลาที่เราไปก่อสร้างในพื้นที่ไหนเราจะให้แคมป์บอสเป็นคนออกไปหาโรงเรียนที่สามารถรองรับเด็กเพื่อที่จะเข้าเรียนได้นะครับทั้งนี้เรายังมีการฝึกอบรมให้กับแรงงานสตาฟและผู้บริหารครับในเรื่องของการคุ้มครองเด็กและการป้องกันความรุนแรงภายในครอบครัวและตอนนี้ครับเรามีการขยายผลนะครับไปสู่การบริการด้านสุขภาพโดยที่ BSI นะครับเป็นคนกลางที่เชื่อมระหว่างบริษัทต่อภารกิจของเรากับกระทรวงสาธารณสุขให้มีการตรวจสุขภาพประจำปีให้กับแรงงานและครอบครัวของพวกเขาโดยที่ไม่แบ่งแยกนะครับตรงนี้ทุกคนสามารถเข้าถึงการตรวจสุขภาพได้หมดทุกคนในไซต์งานครับทั้งนี้ครับปัจจุบันนี้มาตรฐานธุรกิจกับสิทธิมนุษยชนกำลังกลายเป็นข้อกำหนดที่มีความสำคัญมากๆในประเทศไทยโดยที่บริษัทของเราครับจำเป็นอย่างยิ่งที่จะต้องปรับตัวและพัฒนาเรียนรู้อย่างไรก็ตามครับภาคธุรกิจไม่สามารถเปลี่ยนผ่านเพียงลำพังได้แต่ต้องได้รับการสนับสนุนและที่สำคัญเราต้องศึกษากฎระเบียบให้อย่างรอบคอบการเข้าถึงเครื่องมือและการฝึกอบรมเชิงปฏิบัติช่วยชี้แนวทางให้กับเราครับเพื่อปรับปรุงในไซต์งานต่อๆไปจะเห็นจากในภาพสไลด์นะครับเราได้มีการสร้างศูนย์การเรียนรู้ให้กับเด็กมีพื้นที่ปลอดภัยให้สำหรับเด็กเรียนรู้ภาษาพื้นฐานเพื่อให้เขาเข้าโรงเรียนได้อย่างมีคุณภาพและที่สำคัญครับโอนเนอร์ของเราบางเจ้าเห็นความสำคัญตรงนี้นะครับก็ได้มีการช่วยเหลือและส่งเสริมอุปกรณ์การเรียนให้กับเด็กที่อยู่ภายในแคมป์ครับจะเห็นได้ว่าครับการเปลี่ยนผ่านครั้งนี้ครับจะประสบความสำเร็จได้นั้นธุรกิจไม่เพียงแค่มีความมุ่งมั่นเพียงอย่างเดียวครับแต่ยังต้องอาศัยสภาพแวดล้อมที่เอื้อต่อการพัฒนาให้เกิดความร่วมมือระหว่างภาคธุรกิจภาครัฐและประชาสังคมเพื่อสร้างผลกระทบที่ยั่งยืนร่วมกันบริษัทของผมครับที่ถ้าทำบริษัทเดียวอาจจะทำได้ไวครับแต่ถ้าจะให้สำเร็จและยั่งยืนครับทุกภาคส่วนต้องทำงานร่วมกันครับขอบคุณครับ
Thank you so much, Kunpun, for telling us what your company is doing. And we can see that all of this progress you were doing now are being pressured also by the context in Thailand that pushes you to improve your game in terms of human rights and business. So thank you for that. So now I will hand over to Dr. Litea Meo Sewabu, who is online with us. Can we see her, please?
Yes, hello.
Yeah, we can hear you well. Not yet see you. 1 second.
I've got my camera on.
Okay. Yeah, we can see you now. Welcome. We are very happy to having you. So, Dr. Lita will share a little more about how the migrant workers, on the migrant workers' reality in the Pacific Islands, and how the reality of their families is a bit different from what we're hearing in Thailand and in Malaysia, because migrant workers most of the time have to leave their children behind, and that represents different challenges and different opportunities as well for governments to supporting them. So over to you, Dr. Litea.
Thank you, Roman, for that. Yes, hello, everyone. So it's 9 p.m. here. It's almost 10 p.m. in the evening. Yes, so just to talk a little bit about the social cost of labor migration on children and families in the Pacific. So we conducted a qualitative study with 4 Pacific countries last year. The report is available on the UNICEF Pacific website that I will share at the end of this presentation. So Australia and New Zealand, just to provide a little bit of a background, Australia and New Zealand recruit workers from across 10 Pacific countries to work in the agriculture, horticulture, meat processing, tourism, and aged care industries. The schemes have been running for about 15 plus years. And as we've heard from some of the speakers, they both have positive and negative impacts. But my talk today focuses on the experiences of the children and the families left behind. So to understand their lived experiences, we conducted interviews, focus groups, discussions with families, workers, young people, as well as the stakeholders who were linked with social services in the labor schemes. Next slide, please. So I've just included some quotes here for you, but in general, across the Pacific, there is definitely a shift in the burden of care. The older siblings and the grandparents especially are the ones looking after the children. And there's an overdependence on these grandparents. They're under-resourced and many are exhausted. And this is impacting the school attendance of children, their well-being, and of course, their economic and food security. Children's discipline, as we've heard from another speaker previously, is also becoming a challenge. Literacy and numeracy rates, as expressed by the teachers that we interviewed, is also becoming an issue because the disciplinarian or the person that helps with the homework is now the laborer abroad. So the grandparents are the ones helping with the homework, but they often do not really have the capacity to help. The passing on of traditional cultures to the younger is also a reality for some of these countries. It's very difficult not to pass it on now. The shift in the burden of care for family separations will continue to impact our children and their families for years to come if this is not addressed, and support is needed from government, businesses, and communities to find a way forward. Next slide, please. So while labor mobility provides income for most of these families, there are remittances gaps. And remittances gaps mean that there are care gaps. The children and the carers are not cared for financially. So this points out to a better financial literacy and communication training. A lot of them are receiving money, lots of money for the first time and not sure how to divide it up or how to budget. And also there is a need for the families and those left behind to be part of the pre-departure planning, because a lot of them don't know what the reality is like for the workers going abroad, and also just to understand what the labor scheme is all about, what it encompasses. The enforcement of maintenance orders is a huge issue that we found in all countries. So this would mean that the laborer is abroad, but money is not being sent back to the families because the worker has to be in their home country in order for that law to be enforced. So we're currently just talking to governments across the Pacific to see what can be done about that. Also, a review for infrastructure for better access to money transfers. A lot of the workers are in remote areas across the Pacific where there is no Western Union or MoneyGram and where they can access money. And so they've had to look for the middleman in the cities to bring the money across for them. And a lot of times that means that the money doesn't really get to them. Next slide, please. So another challenge is the food, housing, and disaster management. In most of these villages, there are just no men there. So when they have to rebuild houses after cyclones and disasters, there's no one there to help with building the settlements back. Also, when there is the cyclones happening, building the NGOs previously used to be able to get help from villages, but now because the men, most of them are part of the scheme, they can no longer do that. They'll have to hire their own help. Basic infrastructure. In response to this, a lot of women and girls are taking on physical labor in the form of crop management, family and cultural obligations, and also, as I've said before, disaster management. One of the consequences is that gender dynamics are changing, which is very good and liberating for women. But the challenge is that most of these women are overworked and exhausted and then doing everything. And the skills shortages are developing with the consequences on local economies being impacted. The next slide, please. So given those challenges, there is a need for responsible businesses to support the structural challenges for the well-being of workers and families. As stated previously, mental health issues and the need for counseling have become more visible for those left behind. Communication links between laborers and their families is an issue. According to our study, we found that not hearing from their loved ones for the first 3 months often leads to many other challenges within the families. So this is something that maybe businesses can assist with once recruited. Sufficient arrangements for children left behind is also critical, and maybe that could be a criteria for workers and for coming to be recruited in the businesses. Similarly, finding possible ways to address financial gaps experienced by those left behind. As I've said before, the need for financial literacy and budgeting is major. In the Pacific, unlike some of the other countries that we've talked about, the population groups are smaller. So it's evident when you go across some of the villages that plantations are overgrown. No one is keeping them. No one is looking after them. There are villages there that are empty because there's no man to look after the things that needs to be taken care of. So there is a need for a review of the recruitment strategies, maybe because they're impacting small economies in the Pacific. It can be felt it's quite immense. It's impacting local economies, disrupting families, and it's having a ripple effect on the mental health and well-being of children, families, and caregivers across the Pacific. And my last slide. So I just want to leave you with that. That's a copy of the link to the study and the names of the researchers that we conducted this with. And also just to say that the governments in the Pacific are now working together. They've come together to look at some of these issues, and some changes have occurred so far. For example, in Fiji, there's a new policy that's been introduced where both parents cannot be part of the scheme. One parent has to stay behind. In Vanuatu, there is a care plan that needs to be put in place before parent leaves the country, and that is monitored by the ministry that looks after children. I think I'll end it there. Thank you very much, Roman.
Thank you very much to you to making the time between your travel and a good night's sleep. But thank you for sharing this perspective. And I think it's confronting the idea of family-friendly policy with the reality of migrant workers, in particular in the case where children are far away, right? And the solutions or the different solutions that can be provided by the governments and by the private sector. So thank you for sharing these ideas and for being with us today. And last but not least, I will hand over now to Harasika Jayasuria, that is going to conclude the panel to highlight the contribution of how we can actually implement programs to support migrant families and migrant workers as an example of implementation of family-friendly policies. Over to you.
Great, thank you, Roman. So we've just heard in the previous presentation about challenges arising from family separation embedded in labour migration in this region. However, I do feel that we are finally seeing some recognition that the development benefits of labour migration can only be realised if a migrant worker and their families are supported as a whole, regardless of whether they are together. Given the focus of this forum, it's prudent to remind employers and states that under the Children's Convention, all children have the right to be cared for by their parents as far as possible, to maintain direct and regular contact with their parents, and to have their parents assisted in their role as primary caregivers, which includes providing for their children's psychosocial and emotional needs on par with their physical and economic needs. So while labour migration offers vital income for families, remittances do not compensate for certain gaps created when parents migrate. Rather, it comes with foreseeable challenges that arise in all contexts when families are separated. So the question is, how do we support migrant workers and their children and families to manage periods of family separation that are embedded in temporary labour migration? For too long, the social costs have been borne by migrant workers, children, families and communities of origin. But we are now seeing some initiatives, like Family i-Ready in Vanuatu, responding to the need for a more family-centred approach, initiatives that can be scaled up and invested in by businesses and states alike. This approach involves integrating the needs of family members throughout the migration cycle, offering gender and child-sensitive support at all stages. That's pre-departure, during employment, and on return and reintegration. It builds on IOM's integrated approach to reintegration, which highlights the importance of a holistic approach to support that extends beyond the individual to families and communities. A family-centred approach not only strengthens communication, shared decision-making, and mutual understanding of responsibilities between migrant workers and their families, it ensures that gender-related risks and child wellbeing concerns are not treated as isolated issues, but as part of a broader wellbeing and protection framework that evolves throughout the migration journey and is a shared responsibility of all actors involved in labour mobility. Pre-departure preparation must include family members to ensure that everyone is prepared for the journey ahead. Family-inclusive pre-departure programs should cover economic, social and psychosocial support, with examples of this on the slide. It includes things like preparing families for the financial realities of migration, including agreeing on how remittances will be used, supporting families to discuss expectations and shifting household responsibilities, developing strategies for maintaining transnational relationships, care planning for children to ensure stable caregiving arrangements, psychosocial support to prepare for separation, and safe spaces for women to discuss sensitive topics like sexual and reproductive health and gender-based violence. Needless to say, effective delivery of such support requires collaboration between local government, civil society and international organisations working in this space to ensure that families are supported throughout their migration journey and not just at the outset. The overseas employment phase is often the most challenging, throughout which families need support, including through measures like remittance management guidance, as many families struggle to manage remittances effectively, particularly with competing pressures, support for maintaining regular communication, inclusion of families in government services and case management systems, culturally appropriate counselling for workers and families, and ensuring safe channels for reporting family distress or domestic issues. And sustainable reintegration occurs when returnees achieve self-sufficiency and can effectively manage negative drivers of remigration. It involves much more than just coming home. It requires rebuilding relationships, adapting to new roles, and re-engaging with community life. This needs addressing not only economic and employment needs, but also returnees' psychosocial wellbeing across the individual, community, and structural levels. Support during this phase must extend to families and communities, as these relationships and systems are critical to long-term successful outcomes. When families are involved in the reintegration process, the transition becomes more stable, stigma is reduced, and the benefits of labour mobility are more likely to endure. So in the Pacific, IOM is working with the Australian Government, the Migration Multi-Partner Trust Fund, Pacific governments, the ILO and other partners to deliver family-centred assistance to Pacific seasonal workers. This includes the Family i-Ready program in Vanuatu, which empowers migrant workers and their families through robust preparation for the whole family, delivering intensive workshops on expectations of overseas work, maintaining healthy relationships, managing separation, preventing gender-based violence, and financial management. It also offers entrepreneurship modules to support workers and families to plan for successful livelihood opportunities when they return to Vanuatu. An independent evaluation found the program provided a well-rounded support system, with its integration of financial literacy helping participants manage remittances effectively, and its parallel training on maintaining healthy relationships and emotional resilience, helping families to manage separation, reducing risks of family conflict and family breakdown. For reintegration, Family e-Comeback in Vanuatu supports families in joint decision-making, family counselling, financial management, and accessing services to empower families to navigate this transition together. And last year, the Australian Government and IOM, with partners across the Pacific, initiated a pilot program for family-centred assistance to PALM scheme workers, the 4 key elements of which are on the slide. This program aims to enhance support to workers and families throughout the migration cycle, and the capacity of government stakeholders to expand and localise the family assistance model, customising it to national contexts. Employers can play a critical role in promoting family-centred assistance in labour migration, ensuring that the family life and relationships of their employees are protected and respected. To achieve this, we'd urge businesses and states alike to invest in including gender and child-sensitive family-centred assistance in program design, strengthening early planning and providing a continuum of support across the migration cycle, localising and expanding community-based support systems, and scaling up and institutionalising successful models like Family e-Ready and Family e-Comeback to embed a family-centred approach in policy frameworks and bilateral labour migration agreements. Thank you, Sorain. I'll finish there, but I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Rasika. That concludes our panel. We've heard about reality of children and migrant families. We've heard about modalities of migration and how that creates a real difference in the kind of support and solutions we can provide. We also heard about industries, right? In agriculture industry, we heard about the construction sites as well as having very specific challenges, but also ideas of solutions. So thank you for that. Just to remind before we open the floor for conversation, UNICEF published earlier this year a toolkit on family-friendly policies that particularly address challenges and solutions in factories, in farms, in offices, and in service-oriented workplaces. So I invite you also to discover that toolkit because there is a lot of recommendations and experiences from other companies and governments that can guide you. With that, thank you for the panel. Gertrude, please, can you join us to guide the conversation? And we'll open the floor for questions from the floor. Gertrude Lano is Senior Regional Specialist on Labour Mobility and Social Inclusion in IOM Regional Office for Asia Pacific. So thank you, and she's going to help us guide the discussion.
Thank you very much, Romain, and thank you to all the panelists. I think it's been extremely insightful to hear examples of challenges, but also examples of good practices, whether it's in the context of labor migration, where migrant workers are with their families, with their children, but also in contexts where families are left behind. I think it's now time to hear from you, participants. What are your ideas? What are your suggestions? Do you have any questions for our panelists? Any ideas you would like to share? Don't hesitate. So let us open the floor here. If you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand. And I think Arnie have an option in the chat as well for our online participants. You can post your questions in the Zoom. Who would like to go first? I know that's always very difficult to be the first one to ask a question. Yes, thank you for volunteering.
Yes, I'm Sang from the V program. I'm from Cambodia, and I like to ask, organize your company. One of the panelists that how do you support the workers' children when during the vacation? Because during the school time they can go to school and then they are under supervised, but during the vacation they are free at home. So how the company support with this? And then for the final panelist, I see the circle pre-departure and then remedy. I see wow, this is amazing way of working and support the workers. But to me, when I'm working directly with the workers, I see this is on the cloud. So can you tell me more how this being implemented and then the worker really benefit from this kind of policy? Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Shall we take a few more questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Alban from India. I have a general question to all the panelists. In many cases, when we work to rescue children from child labor and place them into education, we face a dilemma or an issue like the child is actually the breadwinner sustaining the family's survival. How can we ensure that our interventions not only free children for education, but also addresses the economic survival of the families so that our solutions are both humane and sustainable? Many times when we work, we find this issue. We rescue in the night shift or night shelter. We do go and rescue, try to rescue. And the child says, I'm the only bread earner of the family. So how that dilemma, should we rescue or should we leave it? If you rescue it, then the family goes breadless. So that is the situation we're in.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this challenge where you have children who are actually the main breadwinners sustaining the survival of their families. How do we go about them? How do we go about rescuing them, considering the situation? Thank you for sharing. Who else would like to come in? Yes, here in the front.
Lauren Dale from Anti-Slavery Australia. I was wondering about, I know Anne had mentioned the business case as an incentive for companies. I'm also wondering, our business colleague from Thailand as well, about how we can encourage more companies to, what incentives can we provide for them to take more action for family-friendly policies?
Interesting question about incentives. Which incentives can we provide to companies to take more family-friendly policies in consideration? Thank you. Anyone else who would like to ask a question or share an idea or suggestion? Might check, Arnie, anything that came online? No? Then I'll maybe start with these questions and see who of our panelists like to volunteer to give an answer. Perhaps we'll start with two panelists first. Who would like to volunteer? You can? Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm going to address, I think, question number 2 and 3. So I have no experience with this, but I've seen cases where when children go back to schools, the families are incentivized. So families are getting money, but if you are, I'm not so sure what your background is, but if you're from the government or business, maybe you can do that, but if you're from NGOs, probably you wouldn't have the resources for that. So, but that's one case that I saw. And in terms of incentives, so for palm oil, on the Roundtable of Sustainable Palm Oil, okay. So there was, what we do, okay, so when we talk to smallholders and you talk to them about child labor, they're like, no, they're just helping, that's not child labor and all that. So very, very defensive. So what we do is when we talk about child labor, we partner it up with how to calculate the credits that they will get from being sustainable through the RSPO. So when you partner money with human rights issues, that's when they're like, okay, so we had the child labor issue first session, and then we had the counting your credits. So when they see the profits, they're like, okay, yes, we'll do this. So these are some ways, and we cannot blame them, especially like smallholders. They're also surviving, and they're mostly from villages. They've never heard about human rights, so we can't blame them. But how can we support them to understand better, and then to show them how systems, I'm not so sure about industries, but in the palm oil industries, there's such a thing, and if you're certified sustainable, then you are able to sell more of your palm oil. Yeah, thank you.
ครับโอเคเดี๋ยวผมขออนุญาตตอบคำถามที่1นะครับเมื่อเด็กปิดเทอมนะครับเด็กจะไปอยู่ที่ไหนอย่างที่ผมเรียนแจ้งให้ทุกท่านทราบนะครับว่าตอนนี้เรากำลังพัฒนาแล้วก็ศึกษาเรื่องการพัฒนาศูนย์เด็กภายในแคมป์งานเมื่อปิดเทอมครับเด็กเหล่านี้ครับจะได้มาเรียนรู้ภายในแคมป์โดยผ่านศูนย์เด็กซึ่งศูนย์เด็กตรงนี้ครับเรามีทั้งครูอาสาที่ได้ความร่วมมือจาก BSI ได้เข้ามาสอนเด็กๆภายในแคมป์งานของเราและที่สำคัญครับเรามีพื้นที่สีเขียวให้เด็กได้ลองใช้ชีวิตการปลูกผักให้กับคุณพ่อคุณแม่เขาทั้งนี้ครับตอนนี้เรากำลังพัฒนาอย่างต่อเนื่องเราได้พูดคุยกับโอนเนอร์1เจ้านะครับที่จะสนับสนุนให้เด็กของเราครับเรียนออนไลน์ผ่านโทรศัพท์มือถือในช่วงปิดเทอมเพื่อให้ใช้เวลาว่างให้เกิดประโยชน์สูงสุดทั้งนี้การเรียนก็จะขึ้นอยู่ที่ว่าเด็กท่านนั้นสนใจการเรียนรู้แบบไหนครับนี่คือการใช้เวลาว่างของเด็กในการปิดเทอมครับขอบคุณครับ
Thank you so much. Kumpum. May I also ask Rasika, I think there was a specific question for you about, the examples you gave on family-centered assistance. Maybe you can respond to that.
Sure. If I understood the question correctly, it was about that concept of pre-departure during employment and reintegration, return and reintegration. And I completely appreciate that sort of conceptual framework in reality is not the experience of people, where everything mixes with everything else, and it's obviously, needs overlap and it's not clear cut. I think what that offers is, like I said, a conceptual framework for really people, policymakers, actors, businesses, whoever's designing these programs, to stop and think about what is it that families, children, migrant workers need at each stage. And whilst there will be overlap, there are also some things that are distinct needs at each stage. So it's about asking people who design the programs to stop and think, what do you need before you separate a family, before you send a migrant worker overseas abroad? You need to. And a lot of the first stage is more focused on preparation, family preparedness, upskilling in terms of financial literacy, understanding what's ahead of you, and preparing the child for that period of separation. Then obviously during separation, there'll be a lot of there'll be overlap in that needs, but it is about what do you do, and what do you do in any situation when a dependent child is separated from their parents? Are those protective structures in place? Is there appropriate guardianship arrangements? All of those types of things, and then monitoring, case management, all of those types of things. Are they in place? Are they working? And then on return and sustainable reintegration is about really addressing drivers so that people aren't forced to re-migrate. If they do re-migrate, there's a choice involved. It's not that they're re-migrating because of financial need or because of family breakdown and things like that. So whilst there's overlap, definitely, and whilst people's experience is never that neat, it's this, I would say, is, and I don't know if you agree, but it's a conceptual framework for really asking policymakers, businesses, people designing the programs to stop and think, what do you need at each stage? What measures can be put in place to address the things that arise from family separation or from the design of temporary labour migration, and how it impacts families at each stage of the migration process. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Did I hear someone? Yes, an online question?
No, I just wanted to add to what
Okay,
was
okay,
saying.
great.
So the little things that she's talking about, for example, in the Pacific, they were saying that a lot of the issues come up at the first 3 months. So, businesses, recruiters can work with those families to find communication ways that they could communicate better with their families. So it's those little things that could really help pre-departure, during the time that they're away, and the post, when they have to reintegrate back to and form relationships back with their children. Yeah.
And sorry, just one more thing I wanted to add. I think also the important thing to consider always is that children's needs also evolve and change as they age. So some of the strategies that may have been put in place in that pre-departure time during employment, some of the things may change depending how long the parent is away for. So it's about kind of having those things in place to constantly measure, monitor, update, put in new strategies. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Litea. Thank you, Rasika. And thanks to all the panelists for answering the questions, and thanks to participants for sharing your views. I think it was a very interesting session where we managed to unpack not only challenges, but also opportunities that are there to advance family-friendly policies in the context of labor migration. And we really explored different scenarios. We heard about, construction sector, Thailand. We heard about plantations in Malaysia, scenarios where often migrant workers are there with their children, but the right structures are not in place, impacting negatively on the well-being of the children, whether it comes to access to education, healthcare, or beyond. And we also heard very interesting data, context, and programming in the Pacific, where we have a scenario whereby a lot of migrant workers move to Australia or New Zealand under temporary labor migration schemes where they cannot bring their families, and where a lot of thinking is also needed on how can we best support family members left behind, and how can we build these family-friendly policies into the design of any labor migration program. Now, talking about family-friendly policies, I think a lot of us have families at home waiting. It is almost 5:30, so maybe this is a good time to end our session. Before I do that, I just want to say thank you to UNICEF for the excellent collaboration, for joining us in this important debate around family-centered policies, but also to all of you who are in the room. I know the colleagues of UN Women are also there, and the UN Business, the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights is there. I think together we have to move this forward. And when we were discussing a bit earlier around those issues, we thought that, yeah, we've collectively given a lot of attention to, exploitation of migrant workers in global supply chains, ethical and fair recruitment issues like that. But the issue of the families, the impact on families and children of migrant workers, the fact, as you said, that migrant workers, they're not just workers, they're parents, their spouses, their family members. I feel it is important for us now to address this topic. We've seen great examples from the Pacific. We've seen great initiatives in Malaysia, Thailand. Let's continue working on this collectively, because the families of the migrant workers need that. Thank you so much, and I'm wishing you a lovely evening, and hope to see you tomorrow for the continuation of the Business and Human Rights Forum. Romain, anything further, or?
No, thank you. Back to your families. Thank you, everybody, for staying so late with us, and thank you to the panelists. Have a nice afternoon.